Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with a good pal of ours, Tony Barnes, and we're going to be discussing the European Union pre and post Brexit. Tony, good to see you.
And you, Tony. Hey, two Tonys together.
Two Tonys together with something fairly in common coming up.
Yes, we have. Mine's a big one. I don't know what yours is.
Yeah, mine is as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, with a combined age of nearly 150, may I present Messrs. Barnes and LeBlanc to you. So, looking at the EU and everything that goes with it, let me give you a quote. And it says, "A day will come when all nations on our continent will form a European brotherhood. Day will come when we shall see the United States of America and the United States of Europe face to face, reaching out for each other across the seas." And that was Victor Hugo at the International Peace Congress in 1849. So he had to wait a bit, didn't he?
Yeah, but they just goes to show he was way ahead of his time.
Yeah, very much so.
You know, very much a sentiment. Obviously, it's been there, I would have thought, from the year dot.
And you can sort of link the progress with the two world wars. In other words, the hopes of after each of those wars of trying to have a Europe that was going to be a peaceful place and stop the warring nations.
Yeah, that's what it was all about, wasn't it? It was said a number of times that we've got to stop the war, and one way is, you know, joining not just the UK, but joining the whole of Europe together.
Yeah, yeah. John Maynard Keynes in the 1920s advocates free trade with no tariffs. And even Churchill in 1943 spoke warmly of restoring the true greatness of Europe after the war. So after the war, and it's getting to the point where we were born here, mate. 1949, founding the Council of Europe. So that was the start.
Yeah. And when you think it's been going for 70 plus years, and there are 49 members.
Yeah, yeah.
Of which only 26 now are actually in the EEC.
Yeah, because it's not the Council of Europe is not to be confused with the actual EU itself, is it?
Oh no, I mean it is the Council of the whole of Europe.
Yeah.
And when you think that included, presumably, I haven't gone through the list, places like Greenland, which left the European Economic Community or whatever it was called in those days in mid-80s.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think there were a couple of other smaller offshoots. One was to do with Denmark, became an overseas territory there. Mm-hmm. They left as well. One more recently in the 2000s. So, you know, there are these oddballs, and there have been people that have left before. So, and of course, we had the big thing with Air Ireland, you know. You will vote till you stay in.
Yeah. Now, that's interesting. We come on to that in a minute.
Oh, sorry.
But no, that's all right. 1952, the European Coal and Steel Community was founded. Presumably that was part of, you know, trying to patch up Europe after the war. And that followed with the Treaty of Rome in 57, which meant the Benelux countries, Italy, France and West Germany, got together to form the initial EEC.
Well, in fact, they were the same
common
people
market.
They had the coal and steel community. It was exactly the same countries.
Yeah, yeah.
I would assume very much Germany and France led, possibly France being the more controller at that time. But you make an interesting point there about the after war. As I said earlier, before we came on air, I worked with a German company and a German guy for 30 years. And some of the comments he made really come home to roost. And one comment he used to say around that sort of time, well, not that time, but after that time, was, "We may have lost the war, Tony, but we recovered a lot quicker."
Well, you know, I think the thing is that when you get smacked to the ground in the way that they did, you know, it's a lot easier to build on a bomb site, isn't it, than to try and recondition buildings that have been damaged by bombs.
Yeah, but they obviously made the right decisions about going forward.
Yeah,
you have to ask the questions: did Great Britain make the right decisions going forward?
Mind you, in defence of Great Britain, and as you know, I am a staunch Englishman, despite the name. If it wasn't for the army, VW wouldn't have got underway again, would it?
No, that's true.
You know, so I think we did help them a bit from that point of view.
Of course we did.
Yeah.
And I think deep down, you'll probably find, if you really dig into it, at that time there was probably a lot of help between all the European nations in trying to recover from the war.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And that'd be fair. If it wasn't for us, we would have been in Europe anyway.
I always, yes, quite. I always think that President de Gaulle, or General de Gaulle, had far more influence than he deserved, given the fact that he had to take refuge in London for most of the war.
Yeah, but it just proves the point.
Yeah.
He was more determined at the time. He came out on top. He controlled the Germans as well. Look what happened. You know, they became a very strong influence. And today, regrettably, the French still have a strong influence, although they have very little control on what they do.
He was definitely
handed that over to the Germans.
Yeah, he was definitely anti the UK joining, wasn't he?
Oh yes.
You know,
and why not?
Yeah,
we were the little beggars across the water.
Yeah, that has saved him.
Yeah, well, that is a typical. Perhaps we go back to the Victor Hugo quote for that one.
Well, I think we should probably. Now, what is quite interesting, as the negotiations for Britain to join sort of came up to a crescendo, Peter Shaw, who was Labour Party front bench man in 1972, noted with the Treaty of Accession that we're giving up our sovereignty. So,
well, by definition, you were giving it up because it was a Treaty of Accession.
Yeah.
And by definition, we were giving up a certain amount of our sovereignty. We didn't see it that way at the time. We decided, we felt that the Queen was still going to be the sovereign.
Yeah.
But hadn't realised the influence that the European community would put on us. I suppose we, in our ignorance, felt that we were going to be the kings.
Well, possibly. The other thing, of course, as you'll recall at the time, it was a battle between Edward Heath and Harold Wilson as to who was going to sign the treaty to get Britain into it, because they saw a lot of historical prestige there.
Of course they did. And they were both pro-Europe anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, let's be fair. We saw it as a big advantage. I mean, I was just settling out into a business career, in serious debt. I was beginning to have influence on company decisions, and then eventually had my own company. And I personally felt it was an excellent thought process. We were going to have, if you like, a lot of better understanding and easier movement of goods and paperwork and anything else that went with it, and a far closer relationship. Not that we were going to be any different than we were before.
Yeah, because we both felt at that time that we were entering a common market. Yeah. And whilst I agree with your point about the Treaty of Accession really giving the game away, I don't think many of us really gave it much thought at the time.
No, because we'd still got the Queen and accession from there.
She'd
followed her father, and she'd got a son to follow her. So, accession was there in our minds. So, but we didn't realise what an influence is. I made a comment here, actually, on my notes, that soon after that, when I was working with the Germans, I used to be backwards and forwards with the German guy, and we both made the same decision. Great Britain really could never be part of Europe because we were different. We had such different cultures. We were used to our independence, but in every shape or form, you had to cross a stretch of water to reach us. And of course, they'd come to that stage where I used to be in his car, and we'd travel from Mönchengladbach to Brussels to Eindhoven. Wouldn't even bat an eyelid.
Mm.
We just nodded to the border guy. I mean, one day he said to me, "You got your passport?" I said, "No, it's in the office." "Oh, shoot, they're checking every fifth car." But
of course,
that was the way they were.
Yeah. This was pre-Channel Tunnel, presumably.
Oh, yeah, pre-Channel Tunnel. But even post-Channel Tunnel, you've still got to show a passport to get across that water.
Yeah, because we're not part of the Schengen Agreement.
Well, we never would be. And
No.
Like you said, there is always that. Because our cultures are so different.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, a German will never queue.
Yeah.
We queue forever.
Yeah, and quite happy to form a queue if we see somebody else queuing, just for the curiosity side of it.
On the chat line.
Yeah, yeah, quite right. Now, remind me, was it the Maastricht Treaty when Ireland gave it the thumbs down, but eventually got involved, or was it the Treaty of Lisbon? There's a referendum.
No, it was the. I'm sure it was the Maastricht time.
Yeah, yeah.
But just before then, there was another significant event took place. In 1961, was it? The Berlin Wall went up.
Yeah.
And 1990.
Yeah.
I think it came down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And again, a good comment coming from my German friend. He said, "Tony, I love my cousins from East Germany, but I can't afford them."
Mm. And it was a considerable cost, wasn't it?
A tremendous cost. And how much of that did the Germans filter out of Europe?
Yeah.
I remember going to Berlin I've been during the separation, but I remember going in the late 90s, and I looked down, doing the Berlin tour as you do. I looked down at Potsdam, the big square in the middle there, and the money being spent was horrendous. And it was all being subsidized by Europe.
But even to this day, there are two Germanys, aren't there? A lot of people in what was the old East Germany feel very jealous of the fact that their cousins in what was West Germany are doing considerably better. It's almost a bit like the North-South divide in England. We weren't going to talk about that, but do you know what I mean in terms of the fact that the East Germany is still, compared with West Germany, a relatively poor area.
Yeah, but there's a lot of East Germans who have done very, very well out of it,
including the Chancellor.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, it is still, but they always reckon that Yorkshire's poorer than Lancashire, so we're all right with that one. Had to bring it in.
And then coming into 2002, they come out with the euro currency. Now, the UK burnt its fingers in 1992, didn't it, with the snake, the ERM?
Yeah.
And I think this time round we sort of had the common sense to say we'll keep with sterling.
Well, again, it's typical. I was actually in Germany when we crashed the pound, and it went from, you're doing deals with customers, and they can't decide, do they do it in the Deutschmark as it was then? We went from 285 Deutschmarks to the pound on Monday to 225 on the Tuesday.
Wow.
And that hurt.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well,
I mean, that hurt my company personally to the tune of 50 or 60 grand just on currency loss.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And a lot of my friends were also caught very badly. And there was no compensation coming from our government then.
No.
Had to get on and sort it.
Yeah, very much so. 2004, a lot of the ex-Soviet satellites joined. Yeah. Should they have joined, given their economic status?
No.
So
a lot of them, no. I mean, certainly there are one or two pockets of positive Eastern European countries, but generally, the fact they all came in was it in two tranches?
Yeah, I believe
were
so.
added. It just seemed crazy,
Mm.
and I think that seriously was possibly certainly the beginning of my thinking. This is not right.
Yeah.
Up to then, I coped with it, and we'd made our decisions. We'd kept out of the euro. We kept out of Schengen. I was comfortable. I was used to it. But when they sort of brought in another 12 countries in one or two blocks, no, that wasn't on.
And of course, I've never understood how the euro works in terms of trying to align so many countries in different economic cycles.
Well, it can't. I mean, we saw this between the pound and the euro. Yeah. You cannot. And even, when you think that we're one of the stronger countries around, look at the desperation Greece went into, Italy, Ireland. It's,
well, rumour has it, as far as Greece is concerned, a certain large American merchant banking company helped them, draw up a set of accounts to get them in. Yeah. Because,
we actually felt that if you just let it happen naturally, perhaps over a period of 30 or 50 years, everybody would take the euro. But to force it down their throat at a fixed rate, end of story. No.
And essentially, it was the Deutschmark in disguise, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, still is.
Yeah. So we then get to a situation in where the European Council starts making political decisions. The Parliament is there, but it's pretty toothless. The real power is with the Commission itself, and the Council of Ministers act as rubber stampers. That was another sort of move where we were losing total control, in my view.
What you've just said there reminds me of what people thought Alderney were going through.
Yeah.
In the last few years. The civil service run it.
Yeah.
The states members rubber stamp it.
Yeah.
It's a fact of nature. Doesn't the same happen within Great Britain, or say the UK, England? What about Scotland? I'm sure Sturgeon only says what the experts say behind.
Yeah.
He's just got a stronger way of putting it. Yeah. Johnson just follows the line.
Yeah. It's a funny old world.
If you think about it, within Europe, we haven't had the strong leaderships. You look at it, the Gorbachevs, they're the Gauls themselves, Chancellor Kohl, Maggie Thatcher. We haven't had those people. And you look around the world today, who are the strong ones? The ones who are almost democratically undemocratic, you could say. Korea, China, Russia.
Yeah.
They've got very, very strong leaders. You might not like what they do, and we certainly wouldn't endorse a lot of things they do, but they do have strong leadership.
And the people do what they're told by that leader.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, we look again, you come more local. In Alderney, we behave ourselves. We follow the line. Nicola Brink tells us what to do, we do it.
Yeah.
Perhaps she should be our leader. Who knows? You've got to bring a little bit of comedy into it.
Oh, no, that's part of the deal.
You've really got to look around the world and think, yes, we need a strong leader within Europe. Don't care if we're on the right side or the wrong side, but at least we know where we stand. Today, we've got to have a discussion about whether our contract is stronger than the European contract to get the COVID jabs. Can the Europeans stop it and all this sort of thing? It's crazy.
Absolutely. So if you sort of look at it from the point of view of the council, the parliament and the commission, the real leader should be what? President of the commission?
No, because he's not elected.
Well, that's right. I mean, that's where the whole thing fails, doesn't it?
Exactly. The leader should be the leader elected by Macron, Merkel, and everybody else.
What, the council of ministers? The council of ministers to make the election.
They should be electing the leader, who will be the nominal head of state.
Yes.
He shouldn't have control over everybody, but he should have control over that council, who will make the broad decisions. And it's like now you've got this situation, haven't you, where because they can't get their COVID vaccines, the Hungarians, the Croatians, I think, are bombing off to Russia to buy their vaccine.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, you can't detail everything down to the bottom line. And
we saw another example of that, didn't we, when they tried to invoke the Ireland Protocol. When they went, well, you know, they should never have done that. That was nothing to do with vaccine, was it?
No, but I still don't understand the Irish situation.
No, neither
do
I.
You either have a border or you don't have a border.
Yeah,
I mean, you can't have one without the other, regrettably.
Yeah.
I know we don't want a physical border across there, and you want Ireland to work as one. Perhaps we should take over Ireland.
Again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other options are available.
Well, you know, you've got to look at it, these things.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a bit crazy, isn't it? But of course, the thing is that Southern Ireland, the Republic, is now, you know, just one step away from driving on the other side of the road, aren't they?
Well, this is it. I mean, I suppose you could annex Southern Ireland to become an overseas territory.
Yeah, Gibraltar too.
And then it would have its own independence. It could still be a republic and still be within the organisation. Solve everybody's problem. It's interesting when all the way through lockdown and everything else, you still see that Irish ferry go past here, if not every day, certainly every other day, from Cherbourg to Rosslare. Yeah.
And that is, of course, instead of God knows how many lorries going from Holyhead across to Dover.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I suppose from up to a point,
they found their way around it, and they do well.
Yeah. But from a decarbonisation point of view, it's probably better for the planet, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure Bruno would like to get his hands on that ferry.
Now, obviously, we all know that the Conservative Party probably had Eurosceptics from day one, back in the 1970s, perhaps even before that.
I seem to recollect for Europe we were something like 70-30 for it in those days.
Yeah.
Whereas today the country is very much 50-50.
So did Cameron have to make that decision to allow the referendum?
Well, he was trying to cling to power, wasn't he?
Yeah, but it backfired seriously, didn't it?
Well, it didn't. It proved the man was strong enough to make that decision. He went through with that decision, and he accepted that decision. He may not have liked it, he certainly didn't like it, but I think it proved the point where the man came out and did what was right at the time. I mean, history will put him on the pedestal for that.
But having said that, he thought, in my view, he thought he was going to win. He was going to walk it, and they didn't. They didn't put the sort of effort in, and it was a multi-party situation, wasn't it? The Remainers and the Leavers. He didn't put the effort in to say, we've really got to stay because of this, this, and this, and essentially Farage and co rang rings around.
Well, yes and no. I mean, Farage certainly had a wider appeal, and people like the working man's image, or a pint in his hand and all this sort of thing. And Cameron was a bit of the old public school toffee nose type of thing. At the end of the day, I still believe the people themselves are the ones who made that decision.
Yeah.
I personally was all for going in the EEC. I was all for coming out of Brexit. And yet my kids, who range between early 30s and 40s, they definitely want to stay in.
Same
because they grew up
with
the benefits.
Yeah.
We grew up knowing what we had before and what we had since. Yeah. And for some reason, we all felt it was better to go back to where we were before.
So there we are. It ended up 51-49.
Yeah, which is a crazy, crazy situation. I mean, if Cameron had been really clever, he would have said, to come out, we need a minimum of 55%, something like that.
Yeah. A clear indication.
A clear indication. It was not clear. I mean, it would go to VAR, wouldn't it, in the football context?
Yeah.
It wasn't definitely clear and obvious, that final decision. And you'll still have the grumblings. Okay, at the moment, the Brexiteers are winning because of the COVID situation.
Yeah.
We're in Europe and Europe, Britain and ourselves are in a very, very good situation. And we should thank them for that. But in the long term, I'm undecided whether or not we would be better still in it, or we certainly have got our sovereignty back, and hopefully we'll get our laws back.
Yeah. And that's
rule our own will.
Yeah. Do you think it was the question of the free labour movement, in terms of anyone coming from the EU into the UK, that really alienated a lot of the population and made them think, at least we can get rid of this aspect?
Oh, was it? I mean, we still got 3 or 4% unemployed, and most of them wouldn't do the jobs that the Europeans would come and do.
Yeah.
Now that comes back to the old story of what you were saying, mainly Eastern Europeans, who are less well off than the Western Europeans. And there's still that big dividing line.
Yeah.
Now today, of course, we made it very difficult administratively to get the people over, and now we're getting the daffodils rotting in the fields, and we're going to have issues with getting the crops out of the land and everything else.
Yeah.
So we do need free movement. We can't have a hard and fast rule.
So need flexibility.
Yeah. Need total flexibility, which it gave us being in the EC or in the European community, or whatever you want to call it. But it gave us all the aggravation that we didn't want. Now, we want the best of both worlds, Tony.
Yeah, of course we do. Well, everybody does, don't they? That's the way life is, and that's sort of human nature. But
so why don't Europe come and join us, and we'll rule Europe?
We've even got the Queen available.
She might not want it.
Turning the clock back, you had a long and distinguished career in the textile industry, and you were saying before we started the recording that it was fairly easy whilst we were in the EU for you to deal with your imports, exports, paperwork, etc. If you were going to start up today, could you start up?
Yes, I think you could start up. What, of course, was happening all through that time was where I was very fortunate working with a German company where the quality and the price was very competitive for a product coming into the UK market. We eventually got screwed by the Indians and the Chinese.
Yeah, sure.
Our big advantage was the quality. And we used to rate this one. If we saw a customer, used to be going a bit of banter with me and Deech, and I say, yeah, but you got to remember, this German stuff is 98% efficient. Your Leicester stuff's only about 80% efficient. And Deech would pipe up and said, if you want the Indian stuff, it's only 50.
Yeah.
Over the years, the Leicester stuff improved the quality, and the Indian stuff, of course, improved their quality dramatically. And of course, what they used to do, very clever, the government would pay them to convert the yarn into fabric. So they'd be bringing fabric in at yarn prices.
Right. Okay.
The yarn across the world was pretty much the same. Yeah, there'll be a few pence here, there, and everywhere. But the cost of manufacture of cottons and things like that is very much a worldwide, I won't say fixed price, but Egyptian, India, and everywhere else, Brazilian. One or two had better grades, better prices, but generally the prices were the same. But if the Indian government was subsidising the knitter, they were bringing it in at 10p a metre cheaper than we could produce it. Even think about it.
Yeah.
So the whole thing, emphasis changed. We still remain top quality, but the Indians caught us up. Local market, use it for specialised. And it proved the point. We used to bring in a lot of fabric from the Far East, from China, from India, and the basics would come in already done and dusted. But if they wanted speciality, then you got down to Leicester, and they could knock a print off. You could show them the design this Friday and have bulk out for you next Friday. It's as simple as that, because technology moved on so quickly. So we became the specialists.
Yeah.
I was going to say, and today I believe it's still that same market.
Yeah.
People like Primark still have to go to Leicester to get the update designs because it takes too long physically to get stuff across from elsewhere.
When you were importing stuff from India and China, obviously they weren't anything to do with the EU. Were you subject to tariffs on that sort of stuff, or?
No, there was a small tariff on one or two products, but the basic products, because Europe didn't produce them,
they
didn't put tariffs on. We needed cotton, so we got cotton in. We needed viscose, it came in. The difference was, if we had to be very clever in things we did. If we took a product which, say, costs from India at 50 pence a metre, and we dyed it, which costs another 15 pence a metre, then we would be tariffed to ship it to Europe. But if we then put another finishing process on, like a print, and that costs 55 pence, then we didn't need a tariff to go into Europe.
Okay, because you were finishing it off in
because
Europe.
we were spending more money in the UK than we were on the raw product. So that's why we still did tend to buy yarn, knit it and finish it, because then we had, and the Germans did exactly the same. They brought the raw material in and they preferred to sell a commodity ready for printing rather than the grey cloth, because there were no tariffs then.
So in conclusion, the UK is out, so there's a brick in the wall missing. Do you think other bricks are likely to fall out of the EU wall over the next few years?
I am totally undecided on that one. I mean, all the signs say yes, there will be. I think the crunch will come, after we got out of COVID, because everybody is so much in debt. They don't know where they stand in relation to anybody else. But I think when it comes to the next round of counting up, perhaps in 2023, something like that, and you start looking at it, one or two countries are going to say, you know what, we can be just as good if we're on our own. And the thought want to come. At the moment, they'll stay, solidarity and all the rest of it. I can't see, it's all gone very quiet about Turkey wanting to come in, isn't it?
That's right.
So, that would have been to me, would have been the death knell of allowing Turkey into Europe. And yet Turkey are a very good country, and in fact a very good supplier of our textiles. So yes, there was, I think that the mood has changed, and I think you'll find, give it a couple of years, and some of the oddballs might decide they've had enough.
We'll have to have this conversation again in 2025, I think, 4 years on, before we hit 80.
I'm going to say, I put in the diary, our pre-80th birthday party.
As ever, Mr. Barnes, it's been a great pleasure to have a chat.
I'll bring the champagne.
I shall look forward to that. Anyway, many thanks. It's been really good to talk to you. And we'll see you again in a few months' time, I'm sure.
Well, give me a little break and I'll think of something else to talk about.
Right, mate. Thanks.